The American Civil War, often misunderstood, was a brutal clash between two distinct sovereignties, the United States of America and the Confederate States of America. This distinction underpins a fundamental debate about the nature of the Union itself. Was it an irrevocable compact, or did states retain the right to withdraw their consent to be governed? The Southern states, in seceding, sought not to control the existing Union, but to establish their independence as a separate and sovereign nation. They formed their own government, raised their own armies, and fought under their own flag. This was not a fight for control of the existing government. It was a fight for self-determination. This perspective challenges the conventional narrative of the Civil War and raises profound questions about the legitimacy of secession. It is a perspective often overlooked or dismissed, but one that deserves careful consideration. The true nature of the conflict, as a war between two separate nations, has significant implications for understanding not only the Civil War itself, but also the ongoing debate about states' rights. The legacy of slavery in America is deeply intertwined with this conflict. Understanding this perspective is crucial for a comprehensive grasp of American history. The Civil War's impact on the nation's identity and future cannot be overstated. At the heart of this debate lies the question of secession's legality. Three Southern states, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, were among the original 13 colonies that ratified the U.S. Constitution. This historical fact carries weight. A majority of 9 states were required for the Constitution to be enacted. If these 3 states seceded, did their original ratification become void, thus invalidating the Constitution itself? Proponents argue that the Constitution, as a compact between states, inherently acknowledged the right of those states to withdraw their consent. They contend that the Union, as originally conceived, was a voluntary association of sovereign entities, not an irrevocable monolith. Opponents argue that the Constitution created a perpetual union, indissoluble and binding upon all states. They point to phrases like "we the people" and the Supremacy Clause as evidence of a unified nation, not a collection of independent states. The debate over the legality of secession remains contentious, with scholars and historians continuing to debate the true nature of the Union. This legal debate transcends mere academic discussion. It strikes at the core of American identity and the principles upon which the nation was founded. The outcome of the Civil War may have settled the question by force, but it did not fully resolve the underlying legal and philosophical arguments. The question of whether states have the right to secede remains a potent and potentially divisive issue even today. The implications of this debate continue to influence American politics and society. Understanding the legality of secession is crucial for comprehending the Civil War and its lasting impact. The Southern states' decision to secede was the culmination of decades of growing tension and discontent. At the heart of this divide lay the issue of slavery, an institution deeply ingrained in the South's economy and social fabric. Southern leaders viewed the institution as essential to their way of life, arguing that it was protected by the Constitution. Growing economic and political differences between the North and South added fuel to the fire. The North, with its burgeoning industrial economy, favored tariffs and policies that protected its manufacturing interests. The South, heavily reliant on agriculture and exports, viewed these policies as detrimental to its economic well-being. This economic disparity, coupled with the issue of slavery, created a widening gulf between the two regions. The balance of power between the federal government and the states became a major point of contention. Southerners, fearing the growing influence of the federal government, clung fiercely to the concept of states' rights. They argued that the federal government had overstepped its constitutional bounds on issues such as tariffs and slavery. The Compromise of 1850, rather than easing tensions, only served as a temporary truce. The Fugitive Slave Act further inflamed passions in the North, while the South saw it as a necessary measure to protect its property rights. A series of events, including the Kansas-Nebraska Act and the Dred Scott decision, further polarized the nation and pushed it closer to the brink of disunion. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 proved to be the tipping point. Lincoln, while not an abolitionist, campaigned on a platform of preventing the expansion of slavery into new territories. Southern states viewed his victory as an existential threat, believing that it would inevitably lead to the demise of slavery. South Carolina became the first state to secede from the Union on December 20, 1860. 6 other Southern states, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas, followed suit, forming the Confederate States of America in February 1861. These states argued that the Union was a compact among sovereign states and that they had the legal right to withdraw their consent to be governed. The newly formed Confederacy elected Jefferson Davis as its president and adopted a constitution that closely mirrored the U.S. Constitution, but with key differences, most notably the explicit protection of slavery. The Confederacy's formation sent shockwaves throughout the nation and the world. The stage was set for a bloody conflict that would test the very fabric of the United States. The remaining Southern states, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, initially resisted secession, hoping for a peaceful resolution to the crisis. However, Lincoln's call for troops following the Confederate attack on Fort Sumter in April 1861 forced their hand. These states, unwilling to take up arms against their Southern brethren, seceded and joined the Confederacy, bringing the total number of Confederate states to 11. The nation was now fully divided, and the path to war was inevitable. The secession of 11 Southern states represented a profound crisis for the United States. It challenged the very notion of a perpetual union and raised fundamental questions about the nature of democracy and the limits of federal power. The North, led by President Lincoln, refused to recognize the Confederacy's legitimacy. Lincoln argued that the Union was indissoluble and that secession was an act of rebellion. He vowed to preserve the Union by any means necessary, setting the stage for a bloody conflict that would determine the fate of the nation. The South, for its part, was equally determined to defend its newly won independence. Confident in the righteousness of their cause and the strength of their military tradition, they prepared for war. The stage was set for a conflict that would pit brother against brother, father against son, in a brutal test of wills. The coming war would be a watershed moment in American history, testing not only the nation's military might, but also its very soul. It would force a reckoning with the legacy of slavery and the meaning of freedom and equality. The outcome of this conflict would shape the future of the United States for generations to come. The war's impact on the nation's psyche and its place in the world cannot be overstated. The Civil War remains a defining moment in American history. Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States, remains a figure of both admiration and controversy. His supporters lauded him as a champion of the common man, a defender of democracy. His detractors viewed him as an autocratic populist, trampling on the rule of law.
One of my most consequential acts was dismantling the Second Bank of the United States. I saw the bank as a tool of wealthy northeastern interests.
In 1832, Jackson vetoed the bill to renew the bank's charter. This act marked a turning point in American economic history. Jackson's policies had a profound impact on the nation's political and economic landscape. His presidency expanded democratic participation, but also sowed seeds of future conflict. The aftermath of the Civil War ushered in a period of profound transformation for the United States, particularly for the defeated South. Reconstruction aimed to rebuild the war-torn nation and integrate formerly enslaved people into the fabric of American society. However, this period also witnessed the emergence of a new form of governance in the South, marked by military occupation and the imposition of Northern political and economic agendas. The Southern states, once readmitted to the Union, found themselves subject to a new set of rules and regulations. The Reconstruction Acts of 1867 divided the former Confederacy into 5 military districts, each headed by a Union general.
These military governments, often staffed by Northern politicians and opportunists known as carpetbaggers, wielded considerable power.
This period of military rule marked a significant departure from traditional American governance. The imposition of martial law, the disenfranchisement of former Confederate officials, and the presence of federal troops throughout the South all raised questions about the balance of power between the federal government and the states. While Reconstruction aimed to secure the rights of formerly enslaved people, its methods often fueled resentment and resistance among white Southerners. The rise of technocracy, with its emphasis on expertise and centralized planning, further eroded traditional notions of local control and self-governance. Northern industrialists and reformers, armed with their vision of a modern, industrialized South, often viewed Southern institutions and customs with disdain. This clash of cultures and ideologies contributed to the tumultuous nature of Reconstruction. The period cast a long shadow over race relations and political discourse in the South for generations to come.
The South emerged from the Civil War a defeated and occupied region. The Confederacy's dream of independence lay shattered, replaced by military rule and economic subjugation.
The Union's victory preserved the nation's territorial integrity, but deepened social and political divisions. This sense of grievance fueled resistance to Reconstruction and the rise of Jim Crow laws. The plantation economy was replaced by sharecropping, trapping black farmers in debt. White supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan used terror to maintain white supremacy. The legacy of Reconstruction continues to shape American society and politics today. The 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868, redefined citizenship and reshaped federal-state relations. It aimed to protect the rights of newly freed slaves, with lasting impacts on legal and political debates. The Citizenship Clause declared, "All persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens." This shifted power from states to the federal government, especially in the South. The amendment included the Privileges or Immunities Clause and the Equal Protection Clause to ensure equal rights. The Southern states, reeling from Civil War defeat, viewed the 14th Amendment with suspicion. They saw it as a threat to states' rights and their racial caste system. Southern leaders argued it violated federalism and state sovereignty. The amendment's ratification ignited violence and intimidation by white supremacist groups. Its legacy shaped the civil rights movement and the balance of power debate. Section 3. From citizen of a state to citizen of a nation. The 14th Amendment's impact on American identity was profound. Before its ratification, Americans identified as citizens of their states. The amendment established national citizenship, fostering a national identity. African Americans were recognized as full citizens, entitled to rights and protections. Despite challenges, the amendment laid the groundwork for an inclusive society. Its vision of a united nation continues to inspire the pursuit of a more perfect union. Section 1. The Incorporation of America. The year 1871 marked a turning point in American governance. The District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871, enacted by Congress, fundamentally altered the relationship between the government and the governed. This act incorporated the United States government, transforming it into a corporate entity. The incorporation created a separate corporate entity, operating with different incentives. Over time, this shift led to the erosion of individual liberties and the expansion of government power. Section 2. Shielded from accountability. The incorporation of government entities had significant implications for accountability and the rule of law. Corporations are designed to shield their owners from liability. Limited liability fosters investment, but changes when applied to government. Incorporation creates a legal separation between officials and actions. This separation makes it difficult to hold officials responsible. It can lead to a culture of impunity and self-interest. Complex corporate law exacerbates the erosion of accountability. Government corporations lack public scrutiny and shareholder oversight. Their operations are often shrouded in secrecy. This system is ripe for abuse. Administrative agencies operate with little transparency. Bureaucratic governance raises concerns about tyranny and erosion of democratic principles. Section 3. The erosion of redress. The right to seek redress of grievances is a cornerstone of a free society. Enshrined in the First Amendment, it provides a mechanism for justice. However, incorporation of government entities chills this right. Different legal rules create barriers for citizens. Procedural hurdles and immunity doctrines complicate lawsuits. These obstacles can deny access to justice. The corporate structure diffuses responsibility. Committees make it hard to assign blame. This erosion impacts democracy. It breeds cynicism and distrust. Effective redress mechanisms are essential for democracy. The year 1913 witnessed a seismic shift in American governance, shaping the nation's economic and political landscape. The Federal Reserve Act, signed by President Woodrow Wilson, marked a radical departure from the Founding Fathers' vision.
Enacted with remarkable haste during the Christmas holiday season, it handed control of the nation's monetary system to a private entity.
Prior to this, Congress had the sole power to coin money and regulate its value. The Federal Reserve Act transferred this crucial responsibility to a private entity, altering the balance of power. This created a system where the nation's money supply became beholden to private financial institutions. The Federal Reserve System's creation was tied to the 16th Amendment, allowing direct income tax. This amendment, ratified 3 years before the Federal Reserve Act, provided the financial mechanism for the new monetary system. The power to tax income and create money transformed the government-citizen relationship. This system led to borrowing, inflation, and government expansion. The 17th Amendment, ratified in 1913, addressed concerns about the undemocratic nature of the Senate. Senators were elected by state legislatures, not directly by the people. The amendment mandated direct election, aiming for greater democracy. However, it shifted power from states to the federal government. Senators became more responsive to national parties and special interests. This eroded state power, altering the balance envisioned by the Founding Fathers. The journey through these historical milestones reveals a stark transformation in the American system of governance. What began as a carefully crafted republic, designed to safeguard individual liberties and limit government power, has gradually morphed into a centralized system increasingly dominated by unelected bureaucrats and powerful corporations.
This is not to say that America's founders were infallible or that their vision was without its flaws. However, the gradual erosion of their core principles raises profound questions about the current state of American democracy.
The United States has reached a crossroads where the very principles upon which it was founded are being challenged. The rise of technocracy and the corporatization of government threaten to undermine the foundations of a free society.
It is incumbent upon every citizen to understand how this transformation occurred and to reclaim the principles of liberty and self-governance.